Hello and welcome to another tutorial, and this time we're going to be looking at advanced multicam techniques. We're going to be looking at a 2-camera interview that thinks it's a 3-camera interview. We're going to be looking at a multicam with built-in chroma key, and also we'll finish off with a complex multi-angle graphics fest that's quite complicated but works quite well. Just before we start, if you'd like to like or comment on here, that would be absolutely fantastic. It all helps, or even hit the bell so you get updated when there's a new video published. Right, let's take a look at this interview. Now you might think, okay, fairly straightforward 3-camera interview. You probably do quite a few of these. We're only cutting the video on here, we're not doing the audio, so that's why we've got the blue edge around the angle. And I would imagine all of you can now sync up and cut with multicams on Final Cut Pro 10 by now. But let's take a look at this multicam. Now, first angle, if we have a look in the inspector, it says it's 4K. It really is 4K, so it's 4096 by 2160, so that's actually not 16 by 9, and that is why, if we have a look here, there is a little scale on it, because you need to get rid of the black bars top and bottom. And you might say, why isn't it 208 or 58 if it's going from 4K down to 1080? Because this is a 1080 multicam. And that's because we've got fit selected to the spatial conform. You can actually just do it by doing the scale, but I did it with the fit. And there you can see that's pixel for pixel on there. So let's just hit fit on there. Yeah, be careful of that. Sometimes people shoot in 4K. Actually, if somebody's going to go and shoot, this was shot on an F5, I actually kind of now ask them to shoot actual UHD because it makes my life easier, and you don't have to reposition the image, which means it's pixel on pixel and cuts down on rendering time, etc., etc. on there. And also, what I've done, because he's on black, I've just moved it down a bit to get the eyes a bit lower in the frame. It was just framed a bit too high for my liking on there. So that's one angle, okay, which is the wide. Now the second angle isn't a second angle, it's just the same media. And what I've done is, if we go down into the multicam editor, I just hit the add angle. I won't actually do it with this, but you can just alt click and drag. Right, there you go, I've done it. Drag, let me undo it, it's going to make my life easier. Drag another copy of the 4K interview onto another angle. Then, if you just say none, it will actually blow that up. So this is now pixel for pixel. So we've got the same bit of media, but now that's actually at the same resolution as the multicam. But it looks like you've got an extra camera. And just to prove it, if I put this down to fit, look, there he's tiny. Can't really use that, can we? We look a bit silly. So if we go none. And also what I've done, I've moved him down as well. What I do when I cut between the same camera is, if I just put that to 0, you'll see why. It's way off. So you need to reposition it anyway, because it takes the center cutout, the center 1080 cutout of the 4K or indeed UHD image. But what I like to do is I actually like to get the eye line the same on both, between the wide and the close-up. So when you cut between the two, you don't get a jump. You know, in my tape editing days, I used to have a Chinograph pencil in my bag, and I used to just put a line on the screen. When you can just do it here, there's a few tools. There's some in the toolkit that you could use from my Industrial Revolution just to position that. But I just tend to put my finger on the monitor and then adjust the angle up and down depending on which. You need to actually go off to the end, which means you're going to have to make one shorter to do this. So like that, and then put it onto the monitoring angle. It's a bit, I mean, I think the monitoring on the multicams, when you build a multicam, could do with a bit of tweaking. There's a few things that I think could be improved, but there you go. You just can move this up and down on there. It's obviously the same length as the media above that. So by doing that, you bought yourself another camera angle for absolutely no extra effort. And you can cut between the two that looks great. Now, why do you say do that? Because normally when you cut down an interview, you've got ers and ums, and people get things wrong. By doing it like this, even with one angle, you've got the ability to snick all that stuff out. And a lot of editing is just cutting out the fat, as I said, the ers and the ums and the stuff you don't want to hear, or indeed rearranging it. Now, you might say, well, why not just have two angles and just blow one up and put it down on the timeline? Well, you can do that, and it might be slightly quicker to start off with. But if you want to start swapping these around, and then you think, well, you've got two of the wides back to back, then what you can't do easily is go back up to here. You're going to have to copy and paste the different scales back in, and if you're unlucky, they could all be rippled one out. With this, you're just going to go up and change it. And click on it. Really easy to do, and that buys you another angle, and that's something I really like to do with 4K, with a 4K interview. Always great if you can have a chat with your camera guy. If they can shoot 4K, this can buy you another camera angle for no extra. But we also tend to do quite a lot of multicam, and here you can see we've got a third angle as well on here. Now this normally tends to be not an f5 but something like an A7 or a 5D. And another tip here is try to get your camera guy to record this as flat as you can, because some of the DSLRs really kind of crunch the blacks, and if you get it the media in with the blacks crunched, then there's nothing you can do to really get those back. You could do a kind of like really kind of harsh color correction with the curve in the blacks, but you're never going to get that back. So what you end up doing is crunching the blacks on the other angles to match the DSLR, and I don't particularly like to do that. So try and get them to record that as flat as possible, and this is the angle that you color correct to match your other angles, because your camera guy is going to be looking at the exposure of the main angle, or the main angles, because we've used the media twice. And just so that we can see that, I tend to do quite a lot of color correcting in the angle editor, because I can see all the angles on here. And here you can see we've got, we've got some curves and wheels on here just to balance this guy up to the other angles. I can toggle those off. You can see it's actually, there you go, it's actual proof. That's a bit crushed, and also kind of there's a bit too much color in there for my liking to match it with the other angles. So I tend to do it. What you can't do, you can't have the vector scope up with the angle editor as well, which is a bit annoying. I'd like to be able to almost flick the monitoring angle between everything and have it on the scope, so I could balance the angles. Sometimes if I can't do it in the multicam editor, what I'll do is I'll go back to the actual timeline, do a color correction on the timeline, and then copy and paste that color correction back onto the multicam editor as well. So this is the first example, a nice 3-camera or 2.5 camera interview. What I also do is we've got the audio recorded on the main angle here, as you can see. Now it was all synced with the using the audio. As you can see, we've got on the second angle. Again, always try and get your camera guy to record audio on the 5D or A7, whatever you do, and do a clap at the front. Get him or the talent to do a clap at the front to sync, just in case it all goes wrong. But these were synced up using the audio information on here. And I tend actually to put the audio effects or the compressor on in the multicam angle. Then you've always got them. So when you go back to your edit, and you go, well, it's a bit, I don't like the compression on here. If you were to put the compression on here on the timeline, and when you chop it up, you end up with different instances of the compressor across the multicam. Whereas by putting it on the actual multicam clip, you can adjust the compressor, and it will reflect the audio control will reflect across the entire sequence of your cut sequence. Sometimes I just throw a rough compressor on there to get going so you can hear it, and then come back and just finesse it afterwards. Again, with the color correction, you can do the color correction afterwards, and the result of your color correction will ripple through the whole multicam sequence. So there you go. There's our first example. There's a 2.5 camera multicam cut in Final Cut Pro 10. So on with our next example, and at first look, this looks like a fairly simple studio shoot, 2 angles cut together using a multicam. And as you can see here, we have the green, which means we're using the audio off this angle, and the blue, which is using the video off this angle. But when you have the same, it goes to the yellow. And I think we've all seen that before with the multicam. But what makes this a bit different? Okay, well, let's open up the multicam and let's have a look. And you might say, well, yeah, you just got 2 angles there, until you spot down here, they're compound clips. Now, in a recent MacBreak Studio Live, or Ripple Live with Mark and Steve, we actually went into a bit of detail saying that you can add whatever you like really into a multicam clip. But you have to make it into a compound clip first. But to do that, you have to make the multicam and then right-click to make a compound clip on there. So you can actually make a compound clip of a compound clip on there if you really wanted to and go a bit bonkers. But we've actually got one made here. So if I open this up, and you can actually see that the presenter is recorded on green screen. And he's got the chroma key applied to the camera original just to make sure. There you go. And it's, you know, not a bad key for the, there's quite a lot of different greens going on in there. I quite like the key in Final Cut Pro 10. So that is one angle, but it goes a bit further than that as well, because what we've got is we've actually got some color corrections on the actual top of that, and we've got some color corrections. If I turn this off, the background has got color corrections on it as well. So we've got a chroma key presenter that's been color corrected on a background that's been color corrected, and the same goes for the second angle. Again, that is a chroma key, and that's a background. And the backgrounds aren't the same background. They were made in relation to the 2 camera angles and dropped in there, although they're animating. And again, I think you'll find that, yep, that's been color corrected as well with a bit of vignette to give it a bit more lighting around there. And then you can switch between the 2. And it switches with the chroma key as well. Now, although I'm doing this on an iMac Pro, this was actually made on a MacBook Pro, and it played quite happily. As you can see, we're not dropping a few frames maybe on there. You can switch to better performance, and that will help because it's only going to show one field as well, because it's actually in an interlaced timeline for broadcast. But we'll leave it on better quality there. Now you might say, well, why didn't you just drop the multicam over the background in the timeline? Well, because when we switch, it sounds obvious, but we switch the background as well. And otherwise you'd have to have kind of like 2 multicams, one with the background on the bottom and then another with the different angles with the presenter on the top. And that'd be a real pain in the butt to do and slow. By doing this, you actually get the whole chroma key composite switching with the multicam as if it was recorded exactly like that. And this makes Final Cut Pro 10 hugely, hugely powerful, because you can put so much into a compound clip and then switch it like it's a multicam. And something I do quite a lot of now is actually build items into a multicam like that. That's a simple but very effective demonstration of the power of the multicam within Final Cut Pro 10, and doing it with the keying all built in is amazing and flexible. So the last example of a complex multicam is this Skype conversation I had with Jeff Greenberg about the Creative Summit a year or 2 ago. And what it was, we were both on Skype, and I recorded the video of the Skype call and wanted to build it into something funkier. I mean, I don't really like the kind of like just people staring at a camera. I like it to have a bit more to it, a bit more camera angles, a bit of cutting to keep the interest. And I did this by building some multicams on here. And I think there's something like, if you look at this, there's a huge amount of edits down here. And there's something like 380 edits in here. And it was what? I mean, it's an hour-long chat on there. And you don't want to look at the same person's face for an hour. Certainly not mine either. So let's have a look at what we did on here. We've got some overlays, which we'll go into in a while, but let's actually have a look at the multicam. So just let me blow up the timeline here and double click to see the angle editor. And here you'll see I've got 3 angles on here. Now the first thing is I have Jeff on his own. Now, if I double click this, again, you'll see down here it's a compound clip. The key to getting complex multicams with graphics and everything all layered up is by building a compound clip. You can't drag a graphic just on top in here. You've got to make a compound clip first, and that's a right click or Alt-G on there. So build, as we said before, build your multicam out of the angles, and then make those angles into compound clips. And to open a compound clip, you just click. And here we have Jeff talking away on Skype. And what I've done is on the top right, I put a graphic, so you can see here's his Twitter handle, Film Geek. Now, because that is in the multicam, every time I switch to Jeff's angle, his Twitter handle will appear on screen, full screen like that, which I really like because it just shows who he is on there. So that's one angle. Likewise, what I've done on my angle, I've done the same. Look, I just should pay attention there. Done the same, put a little ID at the top here. Now these are actually part of our news graphics plugins, which all knit together to make it look like it's a live news show, and that's what I was trying to get across in this chat. Right, okay, so that's 2 angles. So cutting between me and Jeff, we'll get the graphic relevant Twitter handle on there, which is fine. I like that. But also we have another angle, which you probably might have seen, and this is the composite. Now, this gets a bit complicated because you have to export twice out of the Skype app, so you get the full screens, and then if we look at this compound clip, which I've called 2-up, it's like a 2-way on a news. People in news call it a 2-way. If I double click, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn each layer off bit by bit. So let's just toggle these off. And here you see is one of the plugins, it's the background, and it gives this nice shaded background on here like a stage, and you can adjust the colour of that on there. Look, it's got a load of different ones there, or your own. So there's a bit of modelling on there. Then next up, we have the Final Cut Pro 10 logo in the bottom left-hand corner, but that is actually, possibly a PNG, I think. So we've got in this multicam, we've got a generator. So that's a Final Cut Pro 10 motion generator, a PNG file, and that's got the opacity dialed right down to under 5% to give that, I mean, it could push that up. Just undo that to put it back to where it should be. And then on top of that, we have this side-by-side output from the Skype app, which puts both of the recorded videos side by side. This is actually one kind of like super wide video image that just drops on there, and as you can see, I just moved that up to match what's going on top of there, which is another graphic, which is from the news graphics plugins, which puts our names on this on these 2 graphics here. So you could actually say, you know, I'm in the UK, Jeff's in the States, or something like that. But you know, I just decided to put the names on there. They're great because all the colours match, and it's all, you know, all lines up pixel perfect on there. So we've actually got you know, 4 layers built up into a multicam, and because we can do that, we can switch between all of them. That's the angle editor, and you can see we've got the 2 angles of us speaking independently there, and the composite there. So when we talk,
editor is sitting
let's go up to, so we come out of Jeff into the composite. Now on top of that, we've got a few other things. We have got the top left bug, which you can see. Again, that's from the News Graphics plugins. And then we've got the little ident at the bottom here, and this butts up to, that's actually not running. There's an actual ticker that runs at the same time. So this is really nice, and this is all one angle, and it keeps going between the two. So when we cut to me, this sticks to the same. The live bug stays. We've got the Twitter handle, because that changes when we go between me and Jeff. But the actual reason why we were talking is we're offering a ticket to the Creative Summit, so this stays up all the time. So this is actually, if you think about the amount of levels we've got playing,
I don't know whether he's there.
And it's not dropping a frame. We've got 4 on the background, and then we've got 5, 6 on the bottom, 7. So that's 7 different layers on there playing at once. But all really coming from the fact that we've got the ability to switch between these two angles. And you can stuff more or less what you want into a multicam. You could actually shrink the 2 angles that you've got down into the multi-camera. But what I've got is I've got an app that takes the Skype recording and then spits out the different versions that you want. And I'll put a link in that in the description below, so you can have a look at that, because I think this is a really great way to make the Skype calls look a bit more interesting than just kind of like somebody looking straight at the camera, or one of those horrible half split things, or whatever you do on there. So there you go. There's 3 different ways of building multicams. We've seen that you can blow up angles to give you something to cut to from the same angle. We have seen chroma key within a multicam, and our last example, we can see we built a 4-layer, put 4 different things into one angle in a multicam. The key, as I've said before, is the compound clip. That's about it for me for another tutorial. As I've said, please like, comment and subscribe. It does all help, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.